They did not crown her queen. They crowned her king. The nobles who placed that title on a woman's head believed they were installing a puppet, a soft figurehead they could rule through while the real power stayed with them. They were wrong. She would go on to win every war her kingdom fought, expand it to the greatest size in its history, and rule over a golden age still remembered 800 years later. And when she died, they buried her in a secret grave so that no enemy would ever be able to touch her. To this day, no one knows where she lies. Her name was Tamar, and in the mountains of medieval Georgia, she was not called queen. She was called King of Kings. To understand how that happened, you have to go back to the year 1184. Georgia, in the 12th century, was a rising Christian kingdom in the Caucasus, wedged between powerful Muslim empires on almost every side. Its throne belonged to the Bagrationi dynasty, and its king, George III, had a problem. His heir was his daughter. So George did something bold. Rather than risk a war of succession after his death, he crowned Tamar as co-ruler while he was still alive, in 1178, and he had her titled not as queen, but as mepe, king. In the Georgian language, there is no gender in the word, so the title carried the full weight of a male monarch. When George died, Tamar became the sole ruler of Georgia, and the nobility saw their chance. A woman on the throne, young and alone, looked to them like an opportunity. They forced her to make concessions. They expected her to be manageable, and their first move was to find her a husband who would do the actual ruling. They chose a foreign prince, a Rus nobleman named Yuri, and married Tamar to him. It was a disaster. Yuri was, by the accounts that survive, violent and dissolute. And here Tamar did something almost unthinkable for a woman in her position. She refused to endure it. She gathered the authority to have the marriage annulled, and she expelled her own husband from the kingdom. Yuri did not accept it. Twice he came back with armies, backed by rebel nobles, to seize the throne he believed was his. And twice, Tamar's forces crushed him. After his second defeat, Yuri vanishes from history altogether. The men who had tried to rule through her had just watched her defeat a prince and break 2 rebellions. This time, Tamar chose her own husband. His name was David Soslan, an Alan prince and a gifted soldier, and by every account she married him out of genuine affection. But make no mistake about who held the crown. David commanded her armies in the field, but his power flowed entirely from her. On the coins, on the charters, in the eyes of the law, Tamar was the sovereign. David was her sword. Georgia was hers. And with that sword, she built an empire. For decades, the Muslim powers around Georgia had treated it as prey. Under Tamar, that reversed. In 1195, at the Battle of Shamkor, David Soslan led her army against a great Muslim coalition and shattered it. The Georgians captured the enemy's banners, including the banner of the Caliph himself, and Tamar had it carried home and given to a monastery as a trophy of God's favor. A few years later, an even larger threat came. The Sultan of Rum assembled a huge army to punish this Christian kingdom ruled by a woman, and reportedly sent Tamar an insulting ultimatum. At the Battle of Basiani, around 1203, her forces destroyed his army too. One by one, the empires that had expected to swallow Georgia were beaten back by the kingdom of the woman they called king. Under Tamar, Georgia reached its greatest extent. Neighboring rulers paid her tribute. When the great city of Constantinople fell to Crusaders in 1204, it was Tamar's influence and family that helped establish a new state on the Black Sea, the Empire of Trebizond. But she did not only conquer. This was a golden age in every sense. Under her reign, Georgian art, architecture, and learning flourished. Her court poet, Shota Rustaveli, wrote the epic that Georgians still treasure as their national poem, The Knight in the Panther's Skin, and he dedicated it to her. In her lifetime, Tamar was praised almost as a living saint, a ruler so revered that poets compared her to the sun. She had done what almost no monarch of her age managed, man or woman. She had taken a throne everyone assumed she was too weak to hold, and turned her kingdom into the greatest power in the region, without losing a single war. And then, in 1213, Tamar died. Her people could not bear to let her go. The Georgian church would later canonize her as a saint, and she is still venerated today, with her own feast day every spring. But her final act may be the most telling of all. Georgia was surrounded by enemies who hated everything she had built, and the Mongols were already gathering on the horizon, a storm that would break over the Caucasus within a generation. So her burial was hidden. According to the legends, Tamar was laid to rest in a secret grave, deliberately concealed so that no enemy could ever find her body and desecrate it. The plan worked too well. 800 years later, historians still argue about where she lies. Some say a hidden niche in the monastery of Gelati. Others say her bones were carried in secret all the way to the Holy Land, to rest near Jerusalem. The truth was buried with her, on purpose. So this is Tamar. They crowned a woman king because they thought a title could not change what a woman was. Instead, she outmaneuvered the nobles who chose her, defeated the husband they forced on her, beat back every empire that came for her, and gave her country a golden age it has never forgotten. And when it was over, she slipped out of the reach of her enemies one final time, into a grave no one has ever found. Not a queen who happened to rule, a king who happened to be a woman. If this is the first time you have heard her name, then subscribe to Daughters of History, for the women the world tried to forget. And tell me in the comments, they called her king, not queen. Do you think that title made her rule differently, or did she earn it either way?